Hi, my name is John Russell. I used to be known as John Russell Penn, so I'm not hiding that fact. We're here today to try to put together what this case of the Camp Scott murders is all about. At this point, the state of Oklahoma has not recognized any investigation into the facts that I have presented to them on numerous occasions. Starting back in March, I believe, 2011. We have a panel here today that are going to be listening to some of the facts, some of the things that we have to say, and they will have an opportunity to raise their questions. I chose a panel simply because I want to get questions from ordinary citizens. If they have something that they feel needs to be addressed, I want those questions to be recorded. And Rick Busey, I usually call him Gary Busey, but it's Rick Busey. He is an ex-homicide detective. He's worked cold cases before, and we have brought him on as consultant and also investigator in the case. A lot of people have said that aren't you afraid of lawsuits? And I say to those people, I've been doing this for 35 years now, trying to get the state of Oklahoma to address these issues, and not once has anyone threatened me with any lawsuits. Not once has anyone spoken with me concerning the allegations that I've made. It's very curious to me that in all cases up to this point, anyone with any information, the law enforcement would normally question the person, and if it was true or not true, to try to decipher what was truth and what was a lie. At this point, no one has done that, and I know the reason why that is, simply because the state of Oklahoma is trying to put a stop to any investigation as far as the Camp Scott murders. This is not fair to those 3 girls who were murdered, or to the other 8 people that were raped and murdered. Certainly not fair to the parents today that are still alive. Walt Milner is the only one that has passed away, and he was a former Tulsa police officer. But Betty Milner and Sherry and Dr. Farmer, Charles Farmer, and also the Busey parents are still alive. I think it's only fair to them for some answers, and at this point nothing has been done. They have addressed that they've sent 200 pieces of evidence off to Virginia for new testing, and I say to them, I have predicted that when they do come back, if they ever do come back with an answer, it's going to be that everything was inconclusive. That's been their mantra this whole time. Anytime that anything was brought up as far as testing DNA, it was always it was inconclusive, or it was too old, or we didn't have enough DNA. And to those people I say, that's really a spin for this situation, because even though back in 1977 on June 13, when this all happened, they had plenty of DNA at that point. DNA is tested and a graph is made where markers on that graph show what the DNA of that particular individual was at that time. You don't have to keep the original DNA when you've got a graph with the markers. All you have to do is test for the new DNA of potential suspects, which in this case I'm naming as Carl Myers. And his name is Carl Lee Myers. He was a known pedophile in that he had done time for raping 2 little girls. He was a known serial killer, and this can, if you Google anything about Carl Lee Myers, that's what you're going to come up with. And eventually he was put on death row for the rape and murder of 2 women in Tulsa County. I don't think it was Tulsa County, I think it was Rogers County, excuse me. But he was put on death row, where he eventually, 2 years ago, passed away from a brain tumor while he was on death row. So the state of Oklahoma didn't get their, their pound of flesh. But those are the things that we're going to be addressing. I'd like to start out with saying that this is all about the Camp Scott murders, where 3 little girls who were attending a Girl Scout camp called Camp Scott were raped and murdered in a vicious way. At the time when they discovered the bodies that morning, they found the bodies. 2 of them were in sleeping bags. The other, Doris Milner, was outside, exposed to the elements. They were bound, taped, they were bludgeoned to death, and of course they found out that they had been raped. What is not normally out there for the public to know, that all 3 girls, and I'm getting my information from an ex-OSBI agent that was involved, all 3 girls had been violated in all 3 orifices. Most people think they were just raped vaginally, but they were traumatized both vaginally, anally, and orally. So there was a lot of DNA left there. They tried to say that a full-blood Cherokee Indian by the name of Gene Leroy Hart was their suspect. But if anyone will investigate, that occurred on the very first day when Sheriff Pete Weaver of Mays County had stated when he saw the bodies and saw the bindings that the person used to tie them up, he said, that's just like Gene Hart tied up those 2 pregnant women in Tulsa County. Well, of course, we know that Sheriff Weaver had no jurisdiction in Tulsa County, would probably have never come across the facts in those 2 rapes, simply because it wasn't in his jurisdiction. He wouldn't have had any interest in that case, not being in his county. But yet right off the very first day, he named Gene Hart as a possible suspect. Well, everyone wanted to jump on that. The reason why they wanted to jump on that is because the actual killer was protected. And he was protected by different individuals, not only in law enforcement, but also in the court system, even as high as the House of Representatives for Ottawa County. I'll name some of the names, and if they think I'm trying to goad them or push them into suing me, you're right. That's what I'm trying to do. Because if we can get in court, I can have power of subpoena. And with power of subpoena, I can subpoena FBI records. I can subpoena different individuals that had knowledge of what was going on. And what was going on was large drug running through northeastern Oklahoma. And we're not talking about a suitcase full. We're talking about 18-wheeler trailers full of drugs. At the time, when I went to the FBI and told them of my concern, safety for myself and my family, Agent Mark Young with the FBI was assigned to me, and the agreement was that they would try to give me protection only if I would cooperate with them in gathering information and evidence together about the drug running. At that time, I agreed, and I was even allowed to carry a 9mm weapon, even though I've been convicted of a felony before, which is against the law. I think that can be proved because I asked him to run the serial numbers on that gun. He told me that it was clean, it hadn't been used in any felony or robbery or killings. At that time, I agreed. I did go out. I did receive information from a man named Chris Chrisman, who told me the story about what was going on in Ottawa County and surrounding counties. In that, he did name Carl Myers as their hitman. Basically, anyone that got in the way of the drug running, which we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars, they did not want that anyone to interrupt that, simply because these people that were protecting it were getting their cuts. And I'll name some of the names right now simply because I want it recorded. We're talking about House Representative, and I can't even remember her name right now, I'm kind of stuck. But we're also talking about Bill Melton, who was the police chief at that time. We're talking about the sheriff, Floyd Ingram. We're talking about Pete Weaver, who had a personal interest in making sure that Gene Hart was named. We're talking about bondsmen, lawyers, judges, Judge Sam Fullerton, Judge Douthat. It goes on and on and on. But the names that I turned over to the FBI, there was 27 names on that list, if I remember correctly. But how far it went, there was also at least one OSBI agent, which was Chris, Roger Chris. That was working with the OSBI, who had a personal interest in taking kickbacks from the drug running. William Schuline, that was the House Representative. And as we go along, different members that were involved have died off, but there's still some that are still left that knew of Carl Myers' involvement, knew that Carl Myers was the actual killer, but yet tried to focus all the attention on Gene Hart. I'm not saying that Gene Hart was not there, but Gene Hart had an MO, or a modus operandi, of burglaries, stealing. His only purpose in that camp was to try to ransack little girls' luggage and their knapsacks and for money. Back then, transistor radios, that's how dated we are. That was why he was there. But it was Carl Myers and the potential that there was a woman there, and I believe her name was Imogene Busby, simply because she was connected so much with Carl and Earl Busby and also Gene Hart. These were running buddies. So for the fact that some say that, well, they're counties apart. Well, there were only 2 counties apart. But when, the old saying that birds of a feather flock together, well, people who are involved in breaking the law in theft, rapes, murders, whatever, they do flock together. That's how I got involved in this thing, in that I was arrested for some check charges, and while I was in the county jail, and I knew about Carl Myers, I knew of his name simply because Chris Chrisman told me about him, but then I was in the actual jail with him when they brought him back in for trial. He got drunk one night and started spilling his guts about the different people that he had killed, and he did mention the Camp Scott incident. However, the next day, when you're in a situation like that, you don't ask a lot of questions because people get leery of, what, are you trying to, be a snitch or whatever? So, but one of the inmates that was there said something about the Camp Scott murders, and he immediately came off the hinge and threatened the guy, never mentioned it again. So that was a real touchy subject with him. Why he bragged about the others and wasn't concerned about them, I have no idea. But I believe it was because he was being protected and he had no worries about that. Camp Scott was in a different county. He didn't have protection on that. I believe that's the whole reasoning why he was so upset about talking about the Camp Scott murders. Eventually, they did keep Gene Hart as their main suspect. And I will say right now, Carl Lee Myers' name was never brought up in any investigations up to the time when I contacted Stan Florence, the new OSBI director, gave him the name of Carl Myers, gave him the full story, and this was 4 months before we even announced that we were going to be doing an audition for a film. People say, why am I doing a film? Well, I'm at this point right now that I felt that no one's listening, no one's investigating, and the only way I could force the state of Oklahoma to investigate is to put out a film like that and have normal citizens asking, why not? Why haven't you investigated it? why wasn't Carl Meyer's name at the top of the list? Like Stan Florence said, his very words was, this guy was quite a character, wasn't he? He said he should have been right at the top of the list as a suspect. Those are the things that we're dealing with here. Eventually, they did catch Gene Hart, and after a 10-month manhunt, they took him to trial and found him not guilty. The jury members that were questioned about it stated that they were pretty sure that Gene Hart was involved, but the one thing that they all agreed upon was that he didn't do it by himself if he did it. That's never been investigated. It's always been the contention of the state of Oklahoma, the OSBI, and that Gene Hart did it, and he was the only one that did it. The reason why they do that, simply because if they had 2 or 3 others as possible suspects, they would have to continue the investigation. They wanted this case ended. They wanted to use Gene Hart as the scapegoat, and where his name alone would be investigated. Some of the other names that were involved was OSBI agent Mike Wilkerson, Larry Bowles, I've already mentioned Roger Crisco, and there's several other agents that was mentioned in the list that I gave to the FBI. I'm going to stop right now, take a little interview, allow the panelists to ask us questions, and we'll come right back to you in just a moment. We're back. These are the 3 panelists that I had mentioned before. We're going to open this discussion up to them so that they can ask questions and possibly get the right answer from us. So it will be an open discussion, and it is unscripted. Okay, do you have any questions since I last spoke? Anyone?
How many girls was there to a tent?
There was supposed to be 4 girls to each tent. However, the tent that Doris and Lori and Michelle were in, they were supposed to have a 4th girl, but she had been misassigned and put in another unit. So there was only 3 in their tent.
So with that being said, they can pretty much conclude that this was a random killing.
Yes, because see, no one knew where these girls were going to be assigned or anything, other than maybe Barbara Day and her husband, who were the directors of the camp. So a lot of people have said, well, because Doris was African American, that they were targeting her. They didn't know if Doris was going to be in that tent. They would have had to have special knowledge from the director's office to know that. They said because her father was a Tulsa police officer, that she was targeted. All those things are random theories by people who have no earthly idea of what this story was all about.
When they set out to name Gene Hart as the main suspect in this case, they didn't take into account evidently that he was more known in his criminal history as being a thief. And yes, he was a rapist, but he had shown no predisposition toward little girls or any of the brutality that was shown toward these little girls.
Or being a murderer. I mean, he was never investigated for any murders. He was never investigated or charged with anything concerning small girls or small boys.
So basically the MO, even though he was chosen basically to be their suspect for this and take the ball for it, the MO doesn't even really fit him.
No, it didn't. There again, that's why I'm saying, if you're going to, my limited knowledge of how an investigation comes about, they would automatically have brought up suspect lists of people living in the area that had a propensity for rape, especially of little girls, and a known murder. and they would have brought these names into the potential investigation list, am I not?
That's correct, that's correct.
And then they would have questioned them, where were you at the time? Can you prove that you were at such and such? Do you have an alibi during this time period? Carl Myers was never investigated.
And
Never.
also, one other item to remember is these two women that he raped were both pregnant adult women. And, you know, during an investigation, when you go out and you are looking for suspects and types of suspects, their probation and parole has a list of all of the felons, child molesters, the sexual offense offenders. All that is something they can obtain and use as their own database to go out and start questioning people.
In your opinion, as an investigator, wouldn't it be, it would almost be uncharacteristic of somebody who obviously has this violent tendency toward pedophilia, given the violence of this crime, he wouldn't even match the MO at all. I mean,
It's non-characteristic,
right.
non-characteristic of him to do that.
It would take somebody, though, that has a history of this to pursue something so.
And they don't
Great.
stop. They enjoy what they're doing. They don't stop. They continue to do it until they are stopped.
That was the point about Carl Myers, is that he had already been convicted of raping 2 little girls. Once he was charged, because they ran to the parents demanded charges be filed against him. At that point, once he got out on bond, he started killing again, but this time he would rape and kill them simply because they couldn't be running to the parents. And so he was smart enough to realize that, or maybe it was suggested to him, if you're going to do that, Carl, don't leave any witnesses behind. We don't know what went on behind closed doors.
When Myers confessed to you, did he ever mention an accomplice?
He never, no, I don't remember him ever involving anyone else. It was a thing like he was bragging, look what I did, I think he was very proud of the fact that he was untouchable at the time. In that he could say or do whatever he wanted to, and they were going to protect him, and they did. There was one law enforcement officer, but he was a sheriff in Pittsburgh County, Kansas, who actually tried to bring Carl to justice. And when he spoke with and I'll tell you exactly what he told me, when I tried to get Ottawa County, Oklahoma, to cooperate in investigating Carl, I ran into a brick wall. They would not give me any assistance whatsoever. But this, of course, is understandable in that they wanted to protect Carl, and by doing that, they were protecting themselves. So,
Was there any evidence that you know of that showed that there was that would connect them two together?
Carl and Jean?
In June?
I've had 2 accounts. One, Carl did say that he knew Jean Hart, and we do have a witness that said that he saw Jean Hart, Carl, and another man, unidentified man, together on the backside of Camp Garland, which of course was just on the other side of the highway from Camp Scott.
It would seem odd to me that they would single out one man and try to put this crime on him when A, he doesn't really fit the MO, B, that where the little girls were attacked in the tent, it would be very difficult. And as an investigator, wouldn't you say that it would be very difficult for someone to commit that heinous violent crime in a tent with 3 little girls, and 2 of them would not know about it, without being silent about it? There's just not, it doesn't seem to me like one sole person could carry out such a heinous crime and then not have the other girls wake up or be aware of it.
From looking at the crime scene based on what you just said, I would think there would be more than one person involved in the killing of those girls. I would think and based on shoe prints to your shoe prints, large or small. You know, there again, it was raining at the time of the crime. The counselors were at the other end of the complex at Camp Scott. All these factors play into it, but it would seem to me that there's more than one person that was involved in the crime.
I can understand how it may be, you know, being a camper myself, I know how noisy it is in a tent when it's raining and so forth, to mask any kind of noise or anything, but it would look to me like that it would have to be more than one accomplice, because it'd be very difficult to attack and subdue 3 little girls like that at one time without one of them having a chance of escape. So I just find it kind of odd that they would try to pin a crime on one man, when obviously, in my feeling, there had to be multiple
Tim, the reason,
participants.
the whole point of that, they wanted to keep it to one man simply because that ended their investigation of searching for anyone else.
Right.
If they had left it open, well, this could have possibly been done by another person with Gene, or possibly a third person, or however many. Then they would have had to keep their investigation open, looking for the other possible suspects. But by naming Gene Hart and Gene Hart only, it shut down any investigation where they didn't have to look at other people, including Carl Myers. But by certain individuals that were involved in the investigation, from the sheriff's office to the OSBI, possibly to the FBI, they were protecting any other investigation by keeping the focus on Gene Hart and Gene Hart alone. And there's still today, but Buddy Fallis made the statement that he, even though Gene was found not guilty, that he still believes that it was Gene Hart and Gene Hart alone. Agent Mike Wilkerson, same thing. It was Gene Hart alone. They have to keep it to that, or they open themselves up to that they did a very, very poor job, and not only a poor job, but inadequate and possibly just being stupid as far as their investigation was.
To me, being a layperson, just looking at this on the internet and, you know, doing my own personal interest investigation into it, I would have to say, in my opinion, it's the most botched law enforcement evidence
Well, you have to
chain
understand.
of custody and case that's ever been.
You have to understand that from looking at this, OSBI, they were all under the gun. The governor says, get it solved or get split up. Well, when they get split up, their little empire crumbles and falls. So what they're going to do is they're going to find the easiest person they can to try to hang it on, and that's what they did.
And I don't really think the OSBI first came up with Gene Hart. Sheriff Pete Weaver was the first person that mentioned Gene Hart, and he had, of course, personal reasons in that Gene Hart had embarrassed him so much, not only escaping once from the Mays County Jail, but twice. You have to realize he had escaped one time prior to the Camp Scott murders. Then when he was convicted on the 2 rapes of the pregnant women and other burglary charges, he got a 307-year sentence, and he was sent down to McAllister, Oklahoma, at the Oklahoma State Penitentiary, OSP. And he was only back in Mays County on an appeal. Well, while he was on the appeal, he escaped again, along with Larry Dry. And I believe Larry Dry was a potential informant who had made arrangements to help the authorities in finding Gene Hart. But, so he had shamed the sheriff twice. When the sheriff first got there, and I believe he was the first person there by Michael Wheat's statement on the internet, he immediately went to and saw the bindings on, I believe, Doris, and said, well, that's the same knot that Gene Hart used in when he tied up those women in Tulsa. Well, number one, Tulsa County was not his jurisdiction. Second of all, he probably would have no knowledge of the particular events of that crime, since it wasn't his jurisdiction. And third of all, that was a stupid, ignorant statement for him to make when that particular knot probably would have been used just in that one day over the United States, probably 500,000 times. there's only so many knots that a person can tie, what we call nautical knots. And they're used every day by everyone, whether it be a slip knot or a noose, how you tie a knot for a noose, square knot, you know, on and on and on. But there's only so many knots that could have, so for him to make that statement was ridiculous. That showed his prejudice with Gene Hart. Why didn't he say it? Well, I could be a suspect. I used that knot the other day, you know.
It seems to me that, you know, given the evidence that I've seen given in testimonies and on the internet and so forth through research, newspaper articles and whatnot, it seems like everybody had something to gain by just simply letting Mr. Hart take the blame for it.
They did. They did. That was the whole plan. He was gonna be the scapegoat to keep OSBI running and everybody in place where they were at so they could continue on with how they were doing business.
That's what I was going to, what I had originally said. Pete Weaver brought up his name first. Well, of course, the OSBI, under pressure by the governor's office, automatically jumped on that because, hey, that sounds good. He's not only a convict with a large sentence, but he is also guilty of raping 2 women. Yeah, let's go with him.
He has I agree that he has a criminal history, but the pedophilia and the brutality does not match.
No, it wasn't his MO. So,
Criminal profiles, they didn't, yeah, they're both criminals. However, the type of crime that was committed, you know, violent pedophilia, you know, crimes that are committed,
It's a particular breed.
it's a particular type of individual that's gonna do that, and they thrive on it, and they don't stop. They keep on doing it till they get
now I will mention something that possibly you haven't considered. 3 bodies they were taking out of the murder scene, from what we gather, or what I have gathered, is that 2 of the girls, Lori and Michelle, were killed inside the tent, while Doris was still alive and drugged outside the tent. But all 3 bodies were in the same lump put together. Why did they take them out of the tent? And why not leave them in the tent? Because they were going to be discovered, you know, at some point. But with Carl had a propensity to go to water or wooded areas. I believe that they were going to move them elsewhere, dump them in a strip pit, like Carl had done on several occasions, or take them away from the crime scene for whatever reason. And I believe when one of the camp counselors woke up to take a shower, she wanted to get up early before everyone else was up. That interrupted them, and they just dropped them where they were.
But that was very convenient to be in sleeping bags and take them out to the strip mine pits, weight them, drop them. You know, that's very convenient.
As a mother, I just want to know why you think there wasn't better supervision during that time for the girls.
Back then, there hadn't been any crime like this before. That's what made this so much of a national story, is that up until that time, this gruesomeness, attacks on little girls at a Girl Scout camp, or even a Boy Scout camp, hadn't taken place before. People, you know, back then in Locust Grove, people left their doors open or unlocked. They weren't fearful of what could happen. But after this happened, everyone said, you know, they started locking the doors. You know.
Well, you know, back 37 years ago, let's face it, we didn't hear of the homicides and all these other things and school shootings like we do now. Yeah, there was those isolated things, but they usually happen in big cities. We didn't hear about them out here.
Right.
So, you know, people sent their kids away to, I mean, what's safer than a Girl Scout camp? You've got counselors there and what have you. No one would ever imagine someone going there and killing one of their children.
But I will mention, Ronzi, the Girl Scout camp they had camp counselors, and they ranged anywhere from 17, 21, 22 years old. They were young girls themselves, and they were camp counselors and were put in the different units, and they were the ones that directed the girls when to get up, go to the mess hall, what activities were going on. However, with the Boy Scout camp, Camp Garland, which was right across the highway, they were always supervised by adults, usually by fathers. In my case, when I was there, it was my grandfather who was there. So they usually had 5, 6 adults in each unit. Why the Camp Scott never did that, I have no idea. It seemed reasonable to me. They should have instituted that when they first opened up the camp years before.
Right.
Detective, in your personal opinion, when you look back at this, what do you feel like the motives were with these murders?
Well, let's hold right there. We're going to take a break, about a
Okay.
5-minute break, and we'll be back.
Yeah. Detective, in your professional opinion, what do you think the motives were on these murders?
Well, the murders, I believe the motivation, the motive, the whatever you want to call it, I believe you're talking about a pedophile gone off the deep end. I think somebody that was a very simple individual. He likes young girls, and that's where that came from. The problem with the whole case is that this guy here is the type of guy that just fits in the community, and he rears his ugly head. You know, he's well known. He rears his ugly head. He commits these murders. Now we're in a position where the OSBI has to bring someone to justice, and what they have to do is they have to put that on someone. Well, this person obviously is not the person that actually committed the murders that they have brought to trial. Obviously, because they didn't have any evidence. If they had done a thorough investigation, they would have had evidence. They would have, when they brought Gene Hart to trial, they would have had enough evidence, and it wouldn't have been an issue, and they would have went ahead and got their conviction and went on from there. But like one of the jurors said, you know, he may have been involved in it. They may have had an accomplice, whatever, but they don't believe he did it. Evidence suggests there's 2 sets of footprints there. So that means that there's probably more to it than what is being alleged or being released.
You know, Tony, you have to realize, during the trial, they had so many obvious gaps in the story that they tried to put together that it didn't make any sense, common sense to the jury. The fact that they were trying to say it was only one man when the jury's saying no way, there had to be someone, at least someone else, if not another person, possibly 3 people all involved. Some of the other evidence that they presented, like one of the counselors about the evidence that the possessions that she had being in the sheriff's office 2 weeks later, that really upset the cart. You know, it was just over and over and over mistakes that they've made. And I believe in a book that was written, Tent Number 8, that he outlines some of the mistakes and what the DA's office should have done, and possibly what the defense counsel should have done, some of the errors in the trial. So I think that was very productive as far as getting a lot of this information out to the public, and I wish him well on his book sales. So.
Well, in the grand scheme of things, I mean, this is a bigger outfit that's going on here. So basically, when the murders happen, they're trying to cover up something, and that's why they want this to go away somehow.
Well, yeah, I mean, that was the whole point, was to name Gene Hart alone. Like I said a while ago, for them to even consider someone else, it leaves the investigation open. But their thought was to put Gene Hart in the front. Gene Hart did it. He did it by himself. He's convicted. Case closed. But to their surprise, he was exonerated. And when you say exonerated, it doesn't mean that he wasn't guilty. It just means that they didn't present enough evidence to convince the jury that he did it, even though, like one of the jurors had said, that she felt like Gene Hart was involved, but he didn't do it by himself. And so when he was found not guilty, exonerated of the charges, then that left the case open. But Mike Wilkerson, here's another example of the bias by the OSBI. Mike Wilkerson, in his book, Someone Cry for the Children, which was very biased toward law enforcement, didn't bring up all the things that we're talking about right now. He states in the last paragraph that officially the case is still open, but unofficially it's closed. Well, he was announcing right then and there they're not going to do anything else. Even though it was officially open, they weren't going to investigate anymore. And in 35 years, I want to bring up this point, 35 going on 36 years now, since I first contacted every House of Representatives and every senator and the governor's office, the OSBI, whoever might be a legitimate, honest law enforcement on that agency, the FBI, everyone I could think of, I sent letters and outlining all this and giving the names of what they were guilty of. Like the district attorney, Tom May, he was certainly getting his cut. And I contacted all those agencies and have done so, including the media, both paper and TV stations, and have gotten no one to ask any questions whatsoever. Like I said, the only person who had did anything positively as far as an investigation was Sheriff Chuck Sharp, in that he wanted to nail Carl for all the murders that had taken place.
Well, John, aren't you afraid of lawsuit?
No, I've said during one of the interviews, I believe back in Tulsa during the first audition, I welcome any lawsuit, simply because that gives me power of subpoena to subpoena the FBI record, to subpoena Chuck Sharp, to subpoena Agent Mark Young, and get this information out there that there was a list of people who were involved in the drug running up there, that they were being investigated, but the only difference is, the only thing that had stopped them at that point was getting evidence of their involvement and bringing that before a grand jury or possibly the prosecutor's office to file charges, and that's never been done since then. And when I contacted the FBI and I even asked about, the records as far as my involvement, they refused to give me any information whatsoever. But you have to understand, when you're contacting, especially like with the FBI, they're going, if there's nothing to it, they'll deny it. They have no qualms about denying it. But if there is something to it, or there is an active investigation going on, they're going to say no comment. And that's what I've gotten from the FBI since then. Even though I was the one involved in it, it's no comment. So they're backing off this whole thing. You have to understand, guys, that if this comes out in an open investigation, a lot of people are going to be sitting on death row, because the very people that protected Carl Myers and in some cases pointed him to kill, they're just as culpable or guilty of the actual killing if they had taken the knife or the instrument that they used to strangle them or whatever. They're just as guilty as the person who killed them. So those are things that they're trying to avoid. And it's going to be a black eye on the state of Oklahoma, because you're looking at several terms that have taken place from the first governor that was threatening to disband the OSBI up to the present governor, Mary Fallin, who have had this knowledge but have done nothing, because they realize that a lot of people would go to prison, a lot of people would be sitting on death row, a lot of people would be fired, a lot of families be destroyed, so many things. And you have to realize that, hell, people will, kill for a pack of cigarettes. If provoked, what would they do for $1 million or $5 or $10 or $100 million? They're going to protect that at all costs, because that's what they base their whole life on, and the homes that they bought, and the boats that they bought, and whatever. they built up a certain lifestyle based on that income coming in from the drug runs.
Well, I've got a question. After doing some research on the internet, it's come to my attention that they say that they've even found evidence of female DNA. And that's not mentioned in any of the court documents, but it's mentioned in some of the investigation material. Outside of that, it looks to me like if they were to engage you in a lawsuit and you subpoena these people in, then there's going to have to be a whole lot of finger pointing. There will be people that have to cover their tracks, and sooner or later, all these institutions involved in this is going to be a train wreck.
Oh, yeah. Oh, this is gonna be bigger than Watergate. I mean, I've been saying that all along.
Well, there's
In Watergate, no one was killed. Some people were caught burglarizing the Democratic headquarters. Of course, the president being involved, that made it the big news story. But in this situation, we're talking about a hired killer killing little girls, men and women, one after the other, killing these 3 girls in the Camp Scott killings. This is going to be a lot bigger. It's going to bring down the state of Oklahoma. And they deserve to be brought down because they've been hiding behind their positions, their badges, their guns, their positions of authority, their offices. They've been hiding behind that. And even the ones that were not involved with it or were not directly involved with Carl Myers or the Camp Scott murders or any other, even though they weren't involved, they were guilty of negligence in that they didn't do anything about it and still haven't to this day. The one thing I did want to point out, as far as what you mentioned about lawsuits, it's true. None of these people have even threatened to sue me. None of these people have even contacted me to threaten to sue me, simply because I've made it very clear, sue me. But I also, it just occurred to me while I was, during the break, not even the family members of these people that I've listed, even if they're dead or they're still alive, not even the family members have, threatened to sue or had a lawyer contact me or whatever. And it seemed to me that possibly the family members knew what was going on also. I mean, as a layperson investigating this on my own, there is such evidence tampering, there is such fabrication of evidence, planning of evidence, there is such inaction on the part of local and state agencies. I mean, it literally looks to me like the Three Stooges conducted this investigation, this crime scene. well,
I've never seen such
the only
negligence in my
difference
life.
between the Three Stooges was that there were probably about 33 Stooges involved. If you could have that many people coming together to be so stupid.
Well, you're absolutely right, John. It's just, it's really a train wreck. But see, for example, under open records request, you fill out a request, I want a copy of the report. Well, they're saying, oh, well, it's an open case. They're hiding behind that so they can avoid
They're
release.
using every legal means
They're
that they have.
They're using everything they can. For example, or they could say, well, this is a sexual violence, sexual abuse case, whatever. We can't release it because they're juveniles. They could hide behind all these different facets of legalities. However, the fact remains that if no one can get the reports to see what has been done and what hasn't been done, and see the items of evidence, the list of evidence, those items, if no one can see those, then, everything goes along just like it's always been.
They're using every legal loophole and means to
If-
thwart any forward progress of the investigation.
My whole thing is that, for them, let's be transparent. You want a copy of the report? Here's a copy of the report. If you've got nothing to hide, there shouldn't be a problem.
Or be redacted.
Or redact the names out, but leave in the facts, okay? A lot of times that's what happens when you request a report like that. They redact the names, the addresses of juveniles, that's fine, okay? But provided if someone asks for it. It's your duty as a law enforcement official you know, if a case is open, fine, investigate. If you get the information, investigate. If you're not getting information and you leave it open, that's one thing. Go ahead and close it because you can't do anything else with it, okay? After all of this evidence, these 200 pieces of evidence was analyzed, there should have been a report out that says, okay, item number 1, nothing found. Item 2, nothing found, what have you.
Or
Or-
inconclusive or whatever.
Non-conclusive. Or item number 47, we got a DNA match on that with somebody. Right now, the database is so large for DNA, there's a real high chance, a real high probability that some of the DNA that was taken off some of these items could match what they have.
That brings up an interesting point in that back, I believe it was 1986, that Oklahoma passed a law that all felons, whether they were incarcerated or not, that DNA be taken from them so that they could put it in a database. That way, if they got out of prison and they committed another crime, they could automatically link it up simply because they were already in the system. At this point, I've not had any word whatsoever that they ever did that with Carl Myers, even though he was in prison twice during this time period that DNA was taken. And if they wanted to shut me up, probably a real good way to do that was contact me back and say, well, we've done the comparisons and Carl Myers' DNA was not a match. But they haven't even done that. They've allowed this to go on and on and on. But by doing that, it'd have to be a record of that, which includes the person issuing it, the public relation officer, her knowledge of it, the agents that were involved, the forensic experts that were involved in matching up the DNA. All those people would have to be on board and lying about the results, because trust me, if they come out with that, I'm going to ask for the results and I want to see the paperwork. I want to see the link between when they did it, who did it, and what the results were, and get statements from them.
And also, if they send it to the FBI crime lab will initiate a report analyzing each item of evidence. If they go through Oklahoma State, it should be the same thing. And technically, the way it's done normally is when that comes back to the detective that's handling that case, even if it's 5 years from now. If it's not, it's 20 years from now and the person is retired, there should be a detective assigned to that case. Okay, I need you to do a supplemental report. There should be several supplements on file with that report on different things that occurred. Every time there's an action taken, for example, whenever he got acquitted, there should have been a supplemental file on that, because that piece of paperwork should have come back from the district attorney. The district attorney says, we're showing here is acquittal. Should be a report done on that and filed with the police department, because everything has to be tracked on paper. There has to be chronological timeline on anything that occurs in a criminal offense case. And that's what I would love to see, the paper trail.
Well,
I would love to
as
see it.
a former sworn homicide detective, expert in this field, would you not agree that the handling of this case by all the agencies involved, from the local sheriff all the way up, is farcical?
Well, just the fact that you can't get a report alone leads me to believe that there's mishandling. And from the knowledge that I have that John has provided for me, and from what I've seen, it looks to me like that it was a whitewash. They made up their mind who they wanted to hang with this crime, and they ran with it. And whenever people got brought up and different things got brought up, they didn't do follow-up on it. Well, when you're doing a comprehensive homicide investigation, any item that's brought up, even if they said, hey, I think the dog catcher did it because I seen him over there near the camp, the very least you would do is go interview that dog catcher, write a report of your interview of what he said and all that, because a month down the road, you may talk to him again and he may change his story. Once you get his story down, you've locked him in to his story. We get people to do written statements, sworn written statements. They sign their name to it. We do a synopsis on it, put it on file. Goes into evidence. Reason for that is, a month later, we find out something else, we pull that out and I go, he said he did this, he didn't do this, he did this. Why is that? He's lying to us. Then we go back and do a re-interview. That's how you solve crimes. You don't solve crimes by solving them as soon as you drive up and say, well, that knot looks like something that I seen in Boy Scout camp, and this guy knows how to tie him, so it's got to be him. You just don't do things.
Before we break again, I just want to say one more thing. A lot of people have said that, how dare I try to make a film about such a tragic event. I say to those people, then they shouldn't have made movies about World War I or II, or the Korean War, or the Vietnam War, or the Civil War, because this is where thousands were killed. Tragic, deaths. Even friendly fire people being killed, or soldiers being killed because of stray fire from their own people. It's tragic, but that's what they make films about. I mean, that's what they put out to the public about as entertainment. My situation, why I'm doing this, is simply because it's my last resort. Matter of fact, this little gathering here is my last resort that I can think of, is to get the public to wake up, call their senator or House of Representative, and ask questions. Why isn't an investigation being made about this? What are you all hiding? Why haven't you done anything about it? Those are the things that I'm looking for. So I'm in business to make films, I'm in business to make money. But so was Sid Wise, who was the district attorney in Mays County at that time, and a news reporter. They had come together to write a book about this, and this reporter was being fed information that was not given to the public or to the other media. And they were going to write their book, and they were going to make a lot of money. But their motivation was out of greed. Mine isn't. And like I said, we're in business to make money, but that's not my main priority. My main priority is to show what happened, get the guilty people. Even though Carl Myers is dead, there's still those out there that protected him, and they're just as guilty. And you were talking about, putting it all on Gene Hart, how they did that. It's real easy if you want to try to convict someone, especially when you're in the position of the judge and the district attorney and everyone that was involved, to make up an entirely different story that you had nothing to do with and make it look like you're the only guilty party, in my case, they brought me in the court system, forced me to represent myself rather than by representation, and presented evidence that never took place. But they got police officers on the stand who perjured themselves. Terry Durbrow, who is now the sheriff in Ottawa County, perjured himself throughout the whole thing, and it was accepted because he was law enforcement. So it's really easy to get a conviction on someone that didn't have anything to do with the crime whatsoever. I spent 14 years in prison over what they did to me. And yes, I'm bitter. And yes, I do want revenge. I'm not trying to deny that. But I also realize that by getting my pound of flesh from these people, it's also going to help the parents and everyone that was friends and associates with the girls. So it's a win-win situation, not only for myself, but also for the family members.
Well, being a parent of small children myself, on behalf of myself, I'd like to thank you for your efforts in trying to
Well, thank you.
get to the bottom of this, and I'm sure that those little girls and their families will thank you.
Let's break for
They
that.
deserve some peace.
Thank you very much. Let's break and we'll come back for one more segment. Tony, you brought up an interesting point during the break. Ask that question again.
Well, this is gonna be like a two-part question. The first part, because of your past, do you feel like the social media is trying to discredit you so that this story will go away?
I don't think the media is trying to discredit me. I think the things that have been put up there by ABC and Fox News, which were national reports, along with some of the local TV stations and newspapers, they made the whole story about my past rather than the story itself about 3 girls being killed and possibly solving the crime. To me, that's lazy journalism. They should have said, man, the information that I have, they should have looked into it and validated what I was saying. If they had done that, they would have had a national news story that would surpass almost anything that has taken place. Probably the bombing of the 2 Twin Towers in New York City or the Muir building in Oklahoma City would be bigger stories. But in this situation, we're talking about bringing down a whole entire judicial law enforcement agencies in the state of Oklahoma. So, and I was going to point out, that Moreland Barton was a good example, who was an assistant district attorney in Ottawa County. How they tried, well, not tried, they did, to get a conviction against me for 3 checks. We're talking about, one check was like $1,400, the other was $51, and another one for $200. I got 107 years put together in prison over those things, and how that he got the conviction was he brought up that I tried to swindle crippled children, because I did put on a benefit concert. I lost $11,000 in it, so there wasn't any swindling of any money, simply because there wasn't any money after I paid the talent. But he brought that up even after I was convicted. He made statements in a news story with the Miami News Record about my swindling crippled children. Well, if I had done that, they would have charged me with that, because that would have been a bigger charge, and he could have got a conviction immediately and got a life sentence for him. Matter of fact, they tried to try me for 3 life sentences for 3 checks. So that shows you how important it was for them to convict me, and what they were trying to do was put me away in prison where they could kill me and I'd never be heard of again. And twice while I was in, I was sent to maximum security for checks. And 2 times they attempted to kill me. And Carl Myers was involved in both of those.
Right, and that was going to lead me to another question. With all that being said, and this being from going all the way higher ups that are involved in this, do you fear, on your life, or bad things could happen?
Well, like I've said before, that I do make sure that all these doors are locked at night. When I was living in Kansas City, I had 3 occasions where I had prowlers around my apartment. Well, it was a duplex, and where screens had been someone had tried to take the screens off, tried to open the back sliding door and things like that, and I reported. Now, whether that was just someone that wasn't involved, I don't know, but I make sure that all my doors are locked. I also, every once in a while, check my rear view mirror.
Yeah.
Well, that's good policy to keep your doors, windows locked anyway in these days and times. But I personally think that they would have loved to have got you out of the picture. And, we've got people that don't get life sentences for killing people, yet they're trying to go after you
Over a $51
on a
check.
$51 check, which normally those things, as long as you make restitution, they don't even bring charges most of the time.
Well, they went completely out of the normal operations as far as the state statutes, in that back then, anything over $20 was considered a felony. But they had a procedure where if you wrote a check, and these checks were on my account, these weren't writing bogus checks or someone else's account. These were my own personal checks. So either they said I was a very smart con man. Well, if I was so smart, why was I writing checks on my own account? But the procedure was that whoever the check was issued to was to call you and say, hey, your check came back, which has happened to, I don't know, millions of people. I mean, that happens. and then you're given a certain amount of time, I think it was 10 days to go down, pick it up. If you didn't, then they would turn it over to the district attorney's office. They would give you a call and say, you got 72 hours to pick this check up, plus court cost. And then if you didn't, they would charge you. They did not do that, any of that with me. They went from point A to point A1 instead of going to Z. And during the trial, it was a farce. I mean, I wasn't allowed to call witnesses on my behalf. I wasn't allowed to call the FBI agent, Mark Young, to verify that the very people that were prosecuting me were the very people that I was investigating for the drug running in that. And of course, they would have had to recuse themselves if that was brought up. They would not allow me to do that. So like I said before, I mean, it's very easy to slander or to frame someone for a crime if you've got all the people involved, in the positions of power that they had, so.
Well, how does the families feel about your claims?
I've never spoke with the Gaseys. I think they have tried to step back and not be involved in anything. Perhaps, and I would assume, they want to try to put that behind them and not think about it every day. Sherry Farmer is very adamant about the truth, getting to the truth. She's been a spokesman for getting to the truth. Betty Milner and her family, at first they were not, matter of fact, I think the sister of Doris had made the statement that she didn't mind that the film was being made, but she would wish that someone more credible would have been making it. But I said to Betty at some other point in time, I said, if it hadn't have been because of my record and being in jail, I would have never heard the conversations that I heard. I'd never heard the confession from Carl Myers. So it's a two-edged sword. I mean, that if I was just a normal citizen without any record and not being in jail, I would have never heard anything about that. I've never been involved in an investigation by the FBI. None of that would have taken place. So, it's good and bad to the whole thing.
Well, looking at this as a lay person that I'm not involved in any way, it's just a thing of interest to me, but the investigation, that I've done so far on the internet and hearing what you have to say, I mean, it looks to me, it's appearing more and more like there was a pattern of people in power trying to deal with you and get rid of you and put you out of the picture so that their little ring here that they have concocted wouldn't start to unravel.
Well, that was the whole point.
It's
when
almost
Carl
a
came
slap
into
in
the
the
picture.
face evident.
Yeah, when Carl came into the picture, he was the one to tie up the loose ends. Chink Enders, who was killed. Chink was considered dealing drugs in Ottawa County. They got him out of the way, I think, because of him threatening to take it to the news media or whatever. So he was eliminated. Tina Duffel, who overheard a conversation between one of the drug runners and a dealer, she had to be taken care of. But when they brought Carl on to do that, they were not familiar with the fact that he was a pedophile. So when he got carte blanche from authorities to do whatever he wanted to do and they would protect him, then he started going out and killing little girls. And that was something that they had to protect, because if they didn't protect him against that, he could possibly start opening up and telling the whole story, and they didn't want that.
One last thing I'd like to mention, the female subject, that they say that there was evidence that a female may have been involved in it. Do you have anything on that?
Yeah, I can only speculate because I know one female that was constantly involved with Carl Myers and Gene Hart and Earl Busby, and I believe Earl Busby possibly was the one that was involved in the Tina Duffel murder, that he and Carl went into the store, dragged her out into the car, took her out to strip pits, and that's where they killed her. She would be a likely suspect, but of course she's never been questioned. She was charged with one of the murders, but once they realized that Carl's story, that her and this other person she was going with didn't have anything to do with it, then it was dropped. they didn't question her anymore. And of course, they realized Carl was the one that actually did it, so they lowered their bond down to like 12,000 on a murder. You know, 12,000 bond for
But
a murder.
you're the bad man because of the
Yeah,
white collar.
but anyway, no investigation past that as far as the Camp Scott murders. And,
And then again, if you're not capturing DNA like you should be,
Exactly.
how would you know?
Exactly.
If you're not doing a thorough investigation and you're not going in there and capturing all the evidence and basically going in there, setting a perimeter and scanning everything inside that perimeter, taking pictures of footprints, taking evidence like the tent, taking the decking under the tent, all that back and processing it. If you're not processing a crime scene, then you're not getting the evidence.
No,
You're not bringing
yeah.
persons to justice.
I will say, Tim, there was speculation, and I'm sure they probably tested DNA of one of the camp counselors, which came up that there was no truth to that. But there was speculation that possibly some of the counselors had been involved, and they ruled them out as far as any possible female DNA that was involved.
And on the other side of the coin too, they could have been involved, but they ruled them out so they could hang it on their guy that they had. So he's a sole person so that the female didn't go ahead and name
Right.
who else was involved.
Anyway, we're going to try to wrap this up. Do you have any other questions?
That's all I have.
I have one question,
Okay.
and it's really directed, if this film finally gets to where you can produce it, get it
Mhm.
out, and what do you hope could come out of all this? Just that people get the story?
They get the story and the true story of what went on, and that, like I said, it bring the guilty parties to suffer the consequences of their involvement, and to realize that it's just like the story of Walking Tall here in Tennessee. That involved with actual events of, you know, police officers and sheriffs and deputy sheriffs and all these local officials being involved in the drug running, illegal gambling operations, prostitution, all those things. And they protected it by killing whoever got in the way. And in this situation, it's the same old story. There's just no one with a big stick. So.
All right.
To wrap this thing up, I'd like to say to the state of Oklahoma, and especially to Mary Fallin, Governor Fallin, that I hope that the citizens of Oklahoma will watch this and be upset enough to actually call their senator or House of Representatives. At the end of this, I'm going to attach a link which will give not only the names of the senators and reps, but also will give a phone number for them, and then that way you don't even have to look up the phone number. Call your House of Representatives, call your senator, and ask some questions, especially ask the question, why wasn't Carl Myers investigated for the Camp Scott murders? I hope to hear something from you all. If you have any information or you have any responses from those individuals, certainly email me or call me. It will be interesting to see how the state of Oklahoma answers to your questions. Thank you for watching and listening.